Episode number 300. 300. Welcome to Avio's Journey podcast. And welcome to the last podcast for season 1 and this journey. I'm going to talk to you about what the next journey is going to look like and what I'm going to be doing for that. And the future of Avio's Journey podcast. So thank you for 300 episodes, and let's do it. This is VO's Journey. With your host, the incomparable Anthony Pica. All right, so number 300. Today, I want to thank everybody so much for an incredible journey so far. You know, I started this podcast off in 2018, late 2018, early 2019. And the whole idea behind Avio's Journey podcast was to document my journey from starting out as trying to become a voice actor to hopefully becoming a voice actor and then going full-time as a voice actor and, building my voiceover business. And, after 300 episodes and 8 years later, I can honestly say it's been a success. It's been a success, and I've built a successful voiceover business. And thank you all so much for your support over the years. It's been amazing. And, it's funny because starting out, if you go back and listen to episode 1, if you haven't listened to all of them, I totally understand. There's 300 of them. But if you go back and listen to episode 1, I'll never forget. I go back and listen to it, or just the beginning myself, to remind me how far I've come. But I think, it was, I think I sounded like, hello. Welcome to Avio's Journey. Early on, right? Because it was, I was recording about 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. And, I was just starting out on the journey. I'd only been doing voiceover for about a year and a half or so. And it was, the idea behind the podcast originally, right, was to start to create a podcast so that potential voiceover clients would hopefully hear my podcast and want to hire me to be a voice actor. That was the point of the podcast. And of course, to document my journey from going from nothing to hopefully going full time. And, I'm so pleased to say that the podcast documents that. It documents one guy's journey from starting to becoming a full-time voice actor and then landing to where I am now. So I want to talk today about kind of the next chapter in this podcast and Avio's journey, because if you haven't noticed, this has all been season 1, season 1 of Avio's journey. It was a very long season, right? It was a very long season, and now what I'm going to do is we're going to start season 2, and season 2 is going to be another journey. Right? I'm going to be documenting another journey, but it's going to be different than the first journey because I've already made it as a voice actor, right? So that journey is still happening, but it is a new journey now. So the new journey we're going to be documenting and moving forward, right, is going to be documenting my journey on building a successful audiobook publishing company. All right. And basically, the documenting, working with voice actors, helping voice actors grow their business, helping authors publish their work, right? And sharing with you the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations, the challenges, the day-to-day stuff that goes into building a publishing company for voice actors. And, over the last 2 years and more recently over this past year, been very passionate about our certified human voiceover, and, sticking with all human voices and everything we do. And, that's been kind of the backbone of Academy Voices and VO Journey Academy. And so the two of these coming together in this podcast is going to be the journey that I'm going to be documenting. So, I basically started this about a year and a half ago, Academy Voices. And now you could probably say that I actually started Academy Voices a couple of years ago, but when I started it, I was unclear about how I wanted to, or what the direction of Academy Voices was. I wanted to create something, first of all, that had, when I first started and created, I wanted to create something that I could get work for voice actors because, I had worked with so many voice actors. I've coached so many voice actors over the years now. I've watched hundreds and hundreds of voice actors on their journey, right? And I've helped them on their journey. And so many of them are so talented, so much unique um, voices to offer. But for this reason or that, right, their marketing or their ability to get people to even hear them was very hard for them to do, and they struggled with it. Marketing is not easy. I've talked about it a lot. It's a challenge. It's a constant grind, and it's a journey of its own. So I wanted to create a place where education went to that next level of, actually doing. And that's what Academy Voices was early on. And early on, I wanted it to be all about getting any type of work, commercial work, e-learning, radio, promo, audiobook, didn't matter what it was. I wanted it. I wanted any type of work. And I worked really hard. I built the website. I coded a bunch. I coded a bunch of different I made a bunch of different code on how to find people, how to find like people in our roster. I from just making it searchable. Meaning like, so if you wanted a male or a female narrator, if you wanted a specific language, a style, a tone, all of that stuff, I did all this work. And it was very challenging, and I put all this work into it. And I found is that uh, we weren't getting any work. I couldn't get any work because first off, I was targeting too broad of a market, everything, right? And Academy Voices was just being drowned out. No, it was very difficult to get anybody to really come to the website. And I realized I was up against behemoths, right? When you're up against voices.com and you're up against Voice 123 and you're up against the Voice Realm, you're up against Bodago and you're up against VO Planet and you're up against ACX and you're up against Fiverr and you're up against Upwork and you're up against the Voice Realm and you're up against, all of these places and then some, right? It's very difficult to actually get anyone to know you exist. And, I didn't have the loads and loads of money that these websites spend on Google ads every month. And, that was very discouraging because it felt like I'd done all of this work. I made all these promises to voice actors because I was so excited to put this together and to show people. And I had voice actors signing up left and right, and it was very thrilling, but I couldn't get any work. And I felt really frustrated with the fact that I could not get any jobs coming in. Now, we had a sporadic job here or there that we brought to voice actors, but generally speaking, I couldn't get jobs. So, I kept working on it. And, I looked back at my journey, my personal journey as a voice actor. And, when I first started as a voice actor, as maybe I started doing audiobooks. It was my bread and butter. And audiobooks was the backbone of how I went full time. I was doing a couple audiobooks a week. I was making quite a bit of money with audiobooks in the beginning of my journey that helped lead me to leave my job. And I realized looking forward too, I started, diving in and doing more research again. And I found that even now, audiobooks, especially now, are the number one published media in all of media. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's books, whether it's movies, whether it's video, whether it's anything, any magazines, anything published media, audiobooks are the number one listened to media in the world, right? And and now we've reached about $2.5 billion in revenue yearly. And they're talking about in 2030 it getting up to in the 30s, right? $34 billion. I mean, that's heck of a jump. And some in 2032 they're thinking over 50 billion. I mean, that's why you're starting to see Amazon, right? I mean, if you haven't seen it, you have. Amazon is, like they're running commercials over TV on about Audible. And Spotify and all these places are, the audiobook industry is massive, and it just continues and continues to grow. And it's been growing since since I got into, I listened to tons of audiobooks before I even started before I was a voice actor. And, that was a reason originally I became a voice actor, was because I wanted to narrate audiobooks. And I knew then it was growing. And as my time as a voiceover artist has continued over the years, it has continued to grow year over year. Year over year, the audiobook industry just continues to grow. It's never stopped. Despite AI, it's continued to grow. And they've tried to implement AI into audiobooks, and it continues to grow. AI is not carving out their section in audiobooks, because we want human narrators. But anyways, but beyond that, it was something that I realized I needed to get back to basics, and I needed to follow my own journey and apply that to Academy Voices journey. So I made the decision to change somewhat of our direction, right, about a year and a half ago, and completely focus on audiobooks only. Now, does that mean that we all won't do some other work? No, of course not. We always do whatever work comes to us. But our main focus, our number one focus, is audiobooks at Academy Voices and publishing audiobooks. And that was a huge decision, because there was a lot of voice actors who don't want to do audiobooks, right? And that's okay, of course, but there are but that was so I was a little concerned about that. But I decided, hey, listen, I've got to make some sort of decision, and we're not getting any traction. I have to decide, and by the way, this is another note for voice actors or authors and anyone listening, right? There comes moments in your business where what you're doing isn't exactly working. And sometimes a little small course correction needs to be made, like where you're offering your services or how you're offering them. You know what I mean? To large course corrections, like you need to start offering a new service. You need to start expanding what you do. You need to start looking at different systems. Maybe you need to make a hard right turn or a hard left turn, right? There are times where you have to make those decisions. You've got to take those chances in your business when you've hit a wall. All right, when things are stagnant. And this was one of those moments with Academy Voices, like I had made in a VO's journey, quite a bit. And so I decided to do that. And then we were off to the races. I said, okay, now we're doing audiobooks. Now the next challenge came in, which was, okay, so I've got voice actors, I've got audiobooks, right? And royalty share audiobooks from authors was pretty, that was one thing, but I could not, it was the same sort of thing. We didn't have a brand yet. No one still knew Academy Voices. I wasn't doing really socials at the moment because I was running my voiceover business and VO Journey Academy, right? So no one knew Academy Voices. So I realized I needed something to generate revenue. And I had an idea, which was and what's funny about this is that I had this idea when I first started as a voiceover artist. So when I first started as a voiceover artist, as you know many of us do, I started with royalty share audiobooks and off of ACX. And early on, and by the way, early on ACX was quite different, meaning like you could make a lot more money through ACX. Like you not only made money through royalties, but you also made money when they first started their subscription program. And if someone subscribed and they listened to your audiobook, they bought your audiobook with their first credit, you and the author got to split a $50 bonus. And that might not sound like much, but if you had like, 20 or 30 people buy your audiobooks with their first credit and it was $25 a piece, that, like the author got 25 and you got 25, you're talking $500, $750 extra bonus a month on top of your royalties, right? So you had a lot of happy campers, and that was the narrators that Audible built their back on, right? That was built, that's the truth of the matter. And as they're doing now as well, with they're starting this pool, and they're going to be shifting some other things too, again, but they took that away. And as Audible does, they just take, and Amazon does take the majority of all the money for themselves. But anyways, so that's not what this podcast is about at this moment. But anyway, the point is though, is I started early on, and that was something I realized, because I was like, hey, this is great. If I could make royalties every month, then I could add that to my revenue streams. And all I would have to do is figure out how much money per audiobook I made a month in royalties, and then, take how much money I needed to make as a person, as a worker, or what I was making in my job, and just do that many audiobooks, and I'll make those royalties, and then I could leave my job. And I realized early on that I needed to have a certain amount of audiobooks in royalties to make that happen. And it was something like, I always had this dream, I needed like 1,000 audiobooks, right? Or something, because if I made, a couple of dollars a month, it was something like whatever number I came up with at the time, what I was making, it was like $2 a month per audiobook that I had, or something like that. And I needed a couple $1,000 or whatever. That was the goal, right? The goal was 1,000 audiobooks. And I always thought, if I had if I could get 1,000 audiobooks, that would be great. Now, as time went on, I realized by myself doing 1,000 audiobooks in, a couple of years, even by myself, would be just darn near impossible as time went on. I just could not do it. And I had this other idea, because I had gotten hired off of Fiverr for an audiobook, and it was what was the name of it? It was a financial book, and it was Think and Grow Rich. And I'd got hired for this, and they paid me quite a bit of money. They paid me like $3,000 or something, if I remember correctly. And I did the audiobook, and they told me the only thing is that, I had to use a pseudonym, but they were publishing this book because it was in the public domain. And, I was I was like, wow, okay, so that's fine. I didn't think much of it. And I realized, why isn't, anyone doing this, right? Is using not just authors, but also public domain work or things that come available. Why isn't? Then I realized they are. And I went on Amazon, right? And Amazon was doing that very thing, right? Behind the scenes, not being very public about it, but it's available on there. And I noticed that was something that I've always loved. I love history. I love classic literature, right? I mean, Charles Dickens, Hemingway, Mark Twain, Mary Shelley. I mean, all the, Jane Austen, all these stories, I'm going further down. I love them all. Herman Melville, all the just incredible authors throughout time and history. Anyways, point is I thought, hey, I could start while we are building our name, right, to bring more authors in to trust us. We can start also by growing our portfolio with royalty share public domain audiobooks. And however, I thought, well, can this make any money? And that was the thing. So we did an experiment. I got some voice actors with me, and all of us, we did a couple of audiobooks, and I only published one. And this was about 2.5 years. So this was right when we had started. So it was about a year before I switched over to all audiobooks. And it was Hansel and Gretel was our first audiobook that we ever published, Hansel and Gretel. And, it was a short one as well, because I didn't know, do they have to be long? Do they have to be short? You know what I mean? And also I knew that I didn't want to just go through Audible. I wanted to publish everywhere: Audible, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Books, Nook, Barnes and Noble, libraries, right? Hoopla, Biblioteca, Chirp, all of the different, I wanted to publish everywhere. And, but I didn't know, could I publish without having books and things like this nature, whatever. So the answer was, I don't know, we're going to try. And so I published, Hansel and Gretel, and I waited, and I forgot about it. You guys, I'm not gonna lie. I absolutely forgot about it. And, and then, as I was telling you earlier here about, I was trying to research and figure out what can I do with Academy Voices to make it work. I thought, let me look and see what's going on that one. And lo and behold, it had made some money. Now, not a bunch. It made like $15 or $20, right? And, but the point is that I was like, holy crap, it actually made money. And I was like, well, that's the missing, right? Because again, if you're going to start a business of any kind and you're going to do something, it has to make money. And you have to figure out how to get it to make money. And before, I could not figure out how to get Academy Voices to make money. And I was like, well, hey, this isn't it. Because again, we didn't have a name yet. We didn't have authors who trusted us yet, and, why come to us when they can go to all these other places? So this was it. In my mind, this was the moment I figured it out. And so that's exactly what I did. I said, okay, well, we're going to start doing more. We're going to start putting some together. We're going to start putting them out there. And I had set the goal for, what if, and I always think this is funny, right? We always start, what if we had 1,000 audiobooks published? So that set us off on this journey to get to 1,000 audiobooks published. And as time has gone on, we have now hit 600 audiobooks. We hit 600 audiobooks published this year, and we are going for that 1,000 mark. We now have a team. I have a team of people who help and work for Academy Voices, who are doing incredible stuff. We have almost 400 narrators now that go through Academy Voices, and we're growing, and we are pushing that limit to get to that 1,000 audiobook mark. And royalties have really, it has shown me that this works, right? The royalty payments we were able to pay all voice actors, and it's a really cool, special thing. And now we're starting to get authors. I had a couple authors the other day that sign on again, and we're getting traction, starting to build a name for ourselves. It's a long haul, just like building a voiceover business or becoming an author and writing books, right? And building a brand, building your portfolio. It takes time and it takes effort, but so all of that story, but the point of all this story too was to say we are now moving forward with Academy Voices and VO Journey Academy, as a place, even though they're separate, VO Journey Academy is where we help voice actors, right, start and grow their voiceover business, and Academy Voices is where we help voice actors and authors, right, take their books and turn it into audiobooks, and narrators to get jobs and earn money in a safe environment that's run by voice actors. Even I'm taking both of these things, and I'm moving into season 2 of a VO's Journey podcast. We're now going to document that journey. And, this show is going to involve coaching for voice actors still, help for authors, back inside information about growing a publishing company, what happens when, I'm listening to narrator submit auditions, what happens on, the type of performances they do, what happens on helping them grow that revenue and to win more jobs and to become better voice actors in their business. Same with authors. So and then how the business works and how you grow a business, because I'm going to screw up and I'm going to fail, just like I've said many times, right? This show is about helping the new and upcoming voiceover actors start their business and sidestep all the crazy things that I seem to step on. Well, it's going to be the same sort of journey here, because I'm going to step on a lot of crap and I'm going to screw up a lot in building this, production company, this audiobook publishing company. But the cool thing is, I think, is I'm going to document and share with you all those trials and tribulations. And it's the next journey. It's the next chapter in a VO's journey. So listen, you guys, thank you so much. As always, this episode 300, and nothing's going to change when it comes to the name or anything like that, because I'm not going to change that, but it's going to be into season 2, right? And I'm going to be documenting the journey of creating an audiobook publishing company and, showing voice actors how to get work and how to grow their businesses, helping authors how to take their books and turn into audiobooks and then actually sell their audiobooks and all sorts of things like that, and meet in the middle with VO Journey Academy. So thank you all so much for listening. Have a wonderful day. I will talk to you all soon for episode 1 of season 2. All right, everybody. Peace.